There was a loud boom that echoed and expanded, amplified by the dusty hills surrounding us. Someone yelled or screamed, I couldn't tell which, and like a pack of panicked rabbits, we bounded across the loose rock away from the Israeli soldiers and the riot gear. Another boom. A tear gas bomb landed so close I could feel the whoosh of air before it made impact on the ground next to me, spewing its stinking cloud of crowd control. My eyes swelled, my throat closed, my lungs burned, and I thought, welcome to the promised land. The first time I visited Israel, Palestine was just over a year ago. I left shocked. I left scared. I was shocked by my own ignorance, how little I had known or understood about what was really going on in the so-called Holy Land. I left shocked because I heard for the first time an alternative narrative, an alternative story about the founding of Israel. The story that I'd grown up with was that Israel was a weak and threatened little nation, a refuge for survivors of the Holocaust, a place besieged by evil Arabs both within and beyond who wished to destroy it completely. I went to Israel, Palestine for the first time believing that before the Jews had settled the land, this territory was, as Golda Meir so famously stated, a land without a people, for a people without a land. What I learned my first trip there is that there's another side to that story, one rarely repeated, some might say suppressed in the West. I learned that the land that was given by the United Nations to Jewish immigrants after the Holocaust was a land that had been already owned for centuries by native peoples, the Palestinians. These Arabs, Muslim and Christians, lived on the land and cultivated the fields. They had villages and beautiful cities, a rich culture, and a thriving economy. The Arabs had been by far the majority in the land and the major landowners. And they lived peacefully for years and years and years with the much smaller Jewish population. In 1900, for instance, the population in Palestine was about 5% Jewish and 95% Arab. I learned that things began changing long before the Holocaust, changing because of the advent of European colonialism, which sought to divide and conquer land and people. Things further changed with the birth of the Zionist movement in Europe, which encouraged massive Jewish immigration to escape persecution in Europe and to create a Jewish superiority that could claim and control the land. Now, growing up, I'd been told that the Arabs were the terrorists, but I hadn't heard that Jews in Palestine had used terrorist attacks and suicide bombings to take land from the British and the Arabs. Militant Jews strapped bombs to their bodies and exploded them in Arab marketplaces. They attacked the British and terrorized the Arab population, hoping to drive both from the land. Some of these Jewish terrorists went on to become powerful players in the newly formed state of Israel, such as Prime Minister Menachem Begin. Now, obviously, the Palestinian, the Arab population, didn't sit idly by as their own land was being overrun by immigration. There was Arab violence. There was Arab terrorism. There was Arab militias. There was Arab atrocities. But this Arab revolt caused by the influx of European immigrants was beaten back by the British, the Palestinians had been largely disarmed, their leadership imprisoned, killed, or fractured. There was Arab resistance, but the Palestinians were not a strongly militarized people, and they were conquered, displaced, and dispersed by Jewish forces when the State of Israel was declared in 1948. But I was also shocked to learn that the destruction of the Palestinian people wasn't something that had only happened 60 years ago. It was and is an ongoing reality. And last year, I saw this with my own eyes. I'd heard about this great wall being built by Israel that international courts had declared illegal. I had thought that the wall, 4 times as long as the Berlin Wall and in places twice as high, was being built for security to keep Palestinian suicide bombers out of Israel. What I hadn't known until last year, when I saw it, was that the wall was also being built to extend deep into the land not in Israel. It reached across the border into the occupied territories, land that was meant to be part of a Palestinian state once peace was finally brokered. That wall annexes valuable water resources, rich agricultural lands, and cuts villages in half, separating Palestinian from Palestinian. That wall is literally annexing prime real estate into the Israeli side, which will probably never be returned. I was shocked to see that in addition to the wall, there are hundreds of checkpoints that further divide the Palestinian territories into little islands of restricted movement and Israeli military control. Again, these checkpoints don't just keep Palestinians from Israelis. The vast majority are set up in Palestinian land to divide and conquer, keeping Palestinians from Palestinians, and restricting movement and access to family, friends, job opportunities, hospitals, schools, farmland, and places of worship. I talked to bright students who couldn't get past checkpoints to go to their university. I talked to patients unable to cross through a checkpoint to get to the hospital for needed medical treatment. Until I saw it for myself, I didn't know that checkpoints were also places of humiliation, where Palestinians could wait for hours and then be refused passage on an undisclosed whim. Limit freedom of movement, divide, isolate, dehumanize, and control. These are the same techniques once used by South Africa to enforce their apartheid. I was shocked to find out that my tax dollars were funding these serious human rights abuses. My tax dollars, sent in the form of U.S. military aid to Israel, were paying for an occupation that was in direct violation of the Geneva Convention, the International Court of Justice in The Hague, and numerous United Nations resolutions. So last year, I left Israel-Palestine shocked.